Humanity's entry into the Galactic Council was not grand or celebrated. In fact, it was met with laughter. The other species, tall, strong, and powerful, saw humans as weak. Their muscles were thin, their bones fragile, and their lifespans short. They had no natural weapons like the claws of the Galari, no armored skin like the Bractil, and no telepathic abilities like the Velnari. To the Council, humanity was nothing more than an insignificant, soft-bodied race that had somehow stumbled into space travel. When humans first requested a seat at the Galactic Council, the response was amusement. The mighty Thalric warlords laughed so hard that their mandibles clicked together in rhythm. The Bractil diplomats grunted, shaking their thick, armored heads. The Velnari simply smiled in their usual eerie way, already certain of how things would end. Yet, despite the mockery, the humans did not back down. They stood firm, their representatives calm, composed. They spoke of cooperation, trade, and diplomacy. But to the other species, these words were just empty noise. In the eyes of the galactic powers, peace was a privilege earned through strength, and humans, they had no strength. Then came the war. The Jern Empire, an aggressive species known for their brutality, launched an attack on a neutral system. The Galactic Council debated whether to intervene, but no one wanted to risk their own forces. Then, to everyone's surprise, humanity volunteered. More laughter followed. The Council approved the decision, not because they believed humans could win, but because they thought it would be entertaining. A primitive species walking into battle against the Jern Empire. It would be over in days. The first battle took place on the barren moon of Krull 7. The Jern landed first, thousands of their warriors marching with massive armored bodies, each one twice the size of a human soldier. The alien commanders barely paid attention to the humans arriving on their dropships. There was no need for strategy. They simply charged. The battle should have been over in minutes. It wasn't. The Jern expected a direct fight, but humans did not fight like other species. They did not stand in neat battle formations. They did not rely on brute strength. Instead, they used something far more dangerous: their minds. The first Jern charge ended in disaster. Humans set traps, used the terrain, and outmaneuvered the enemy. Jern warriors ran into ambushes, confused by the unpredictable attacks. When they tried to regroup, they found their supply lines cut. When they attempted to retreat, the humans had already blocked their escape. Within hours, the Jern forces were in chaos. Within days, they were completely wiped out. The Galactic Council received the report in stunned silence. No one laughed. Something was wrong. Humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to lose. And yet, they had just crushed an enemy that had conquered entire worlds. The council members exchanged nervous glances. Maybe, just maybe, humanity was not as weak as they had thought. And if that was true, then what else had they misunderstood? The Galactic Council struggled to comprehend what had just happened. Humanity, the species they had ridiculed, had annihilated an entire Jern battalion. The reports were clear. The Jern had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and outgunned. But how? The Jern Empire had never lost a battle before. They were brutal, powerful, and relentless. Yet, somehow, the humans had crushed them without even suffering major losses. The council chambers, once filled with laughter at humanity's weakness, now fell into uneasy silence. The Bractil warlords, their thick, armored faces unreadable, exchanged tense whispers. The Velnari, masters of telepathy, stared at the human ambassador with an eerie curiosity, as if trying to pry into the secrets of their mind. Even the mighty Thalric, who had never feared another species, seemed cautious. Something was not right. To understand what had happened, the council demanded a full debriefing. The human commander, a man named Captain Elias Grant, stood before them, his uniform crisp but his eyes sharp, calculating. He spoke in a calm, measured tone, explaining humanity's tactics, their strategies, the way they adapted in real time. The council listened in stunned silence. War is not about strength alone, Captain Grant explained. It's about strategy. It's about innovation. It's about knowing your enemy better than they know themselves. The Bractil scoffed. You won one battle. That means nothing in the grand scale of war. Captain Grant's expression did not change. He simply placed a data tablet onto the table. Then let's talk about the other battles. With a single tap, the display lit up, showing footage from multiple battlefields. The council members leaned forward, eyes narrowing as they watched. It was worse than they had imagined. Everywhere, the journey clashed with humanity. The same thing happened. Complete disaster. Human ships, smaller and weaker, moved unpredictably, darting through enemy formations like predators weaving through a herd. Their soldiers, physically frail compared to the towering Jern warriors, fought with an intelligence and precision never seen before. They lured the Jern into traps, baited them into overextending, and used their own size against them. In one battle, a single human unit, outnumbered 10-1, led an entire Jern battalion into a narrow canyon, and then collapsed the cliffs on top of them. In another, human engineers hacked enemy communications, spreading false orders that caused the Jern to attack their own forces. And in the most shocking footage of all, a single human fleet, far smaller than its Jern counterpart, used an artificial gravity trap to pull the enemy ships into the orbit of a dying star, erasing them from existence. By the time the footage ended, the council chambers were deathly silent. The humans did not fight like any species the galaxy had ever seen. They did not rely on brute strength or numbers. They used intelligence, deception, and adaptability. They turned weakness into strength. And that was far more terrifying than any claw, armor, or telepathic power. For the first time in history, the Galactic Council feared humanity. And deep in the shadows, unseen by the diplomats and warlords, the Velnari telepaths shared a silent, chilling thought. If humans were this dangerous when they were underestimated, what would they become if they were truly threatened? The Galactic Council was no longer laughing. The moment the battle reports surfaced, silence fell upon the once arrogant assembly. The Jern Empire had been humiliated, not just defeated, but systematically outplayed at every turn. Their fleets had been shattered, their warlords slain, and their battle strategies rendered useless against a species they had mocked as fragile. The chamber, usually filled with bickering and political maneuvering, now felt tense. Every representative sat rigid, their eyes locked on the lone human standing in the center. Captain Elias Grant remained calm, his expression unreadable as he observed the alien leaders who once ridiculed his kind. Now, they were afraid. A towering Thalric general broke the silence, his deep voice laced with confusion. How? How did your kind do this? The Jern are unstoppable. They have conquered over 100 worlds. Their warriors are bred for war. And yet, his voice faltered as his mandibles clicked anxiously. You crushed them like insects. Captain Grant merely tilted his head. You underestimated us. The Bractil warlord slammed a heavy, clawed fist onto the council table, cracking the reinforced alloy. That is not an answer, human. His reptilian eyes burned with frustration. Your species was weak. We analyzed your physiology, your technology. By all logic, you should have been destroyed. Captain Grant exhaled slowly. Logic. The mistake you all made was assuming war is just numbers and power. You thought it was about who had the strongest warriors, the most advanced weapons. But war is about adaptation. It's about learning. And more than anything, he stepped forward, letting the weight of his words sink in. It's about who wants to win the most. A Velnari diplomat, one of the few species with true telepathic abilities, had been listening silently. Now she finally spoke, her soft, melodic voice carrying an eerie calm. I have touched the thoughts of your soldiers, Captain Grant. I have felt their determination, their relentless will to survive. It is terrifying. Humans do not fear death as other species do. Grant gave a small, humorless smile. We do fear it, but we accept it, because we know that sometimes the only way forward is through the fire. The Velnari nodded slowly, her glowing eyes dimming in thought. That is why the Jern lost. They fought with confidence. Your people fought as if they had no other choice. The Thalric general growled. A desperate species is a dangerous one. But this is something else. Your tactics, your deception, your willingness to sacrifice, they are unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. You fight like a cornered predator. But I see now that you were never truly cornered, were you? Grant chuckled, a quiet, knowing sound. No, we just let you think we were. A cold realization swept through the room. The aliens had believed they were superior in every way, stronger, faster, more advanced. But none of it had mattered, because humans had fought wars long before they reached the stars. Wars against nature, against themselves, against impossible odds. They had mastered the art of survival in ways the galaxy had never imagined. The Bractyl warlord snarled, his pride wounded. Tell me, human, if you are so powerful, why did you let us believe you were weak? Grant's smile vanished. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze unshaken. Because it was useful. Because when your enemies think you're weak, they make mistakes. And when they make mistakes, he folded his hands behind his back. They lose. The council chamber remained deathly still. For years, the galactic empires had mocked humanity, dismissing them as insignificant. But now, they understood the truth. They had never been laughing at humanity. Humanity had been laughing at them. The aftermath of the battle sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The once mighty Jern Empire had been humiliated, their fleets shattered, their warlords silenced. The Galactic Council, which had mocked humanity's weakness, now sat in fearful silence. No one dared to speak first. No one wanted to acknowledge the truth that burned in their minds. They had been wrong about humans. Captain Elias Grant stood in the center of the chamber, his uniform still bearing the scars of war. He said nothing, letting the weight of reality settle upon those who once scoffed at his people. Finally, the silence was broken by the Prime Chancellor of the Council, an elder being with pale, shimmering skin and eyes that held centuries of wisdom. His voice was calm, yet strained. We miscalculated, the Chancellor admitted, his words slow and deliberate. We assumed your kind was fragile. We assumed you lacked the strength to stand against our greatest warriors. His fingers tapped against the polished table. Clearly, we were mistaken. A sharp hiss came from the Bractyl warlord, his golden scales rippling with frustration. Mistaken. We were deceived. They let us believe they were weak. They tricked us. His slitted eyes locked onto Captain Grant. Did you plan this from the beginning, human? Grant's expression remained unreadable. We didn't need to plan anything. You did it to yourselves. You saw what you wanted to see. Small, fragile creatures with no claws, no natural armor. And because of that, you never looked deeper. The warlord bared his fangs. And what should we have seen? Grant tilted his head slightly. That survival isn't about size or brute strength. It's about adaptation. It's about intelligence. It's about knowing when to fight, when to retreat, and when to let your enemies think they've already won. His voice was quiet but firm. Humans have spent centuries fighting wars. Against nature. Against each other. Against impossible odds. You thought you were dealing with prey. He took a step forward, his gaze unwavering. But you were dealing with predators. A murmur spread through the council. Some looked uneasy. Others looked in rage. The Thalric general, who had once laughed at humanity's so-called weakness, now clenched his massive fists. You fight like nothing we've ever seen before. Ruthless. Unpredictable. No hesitation. No fear. Even the Jern, with all their conquests, never fought with such determination. Grant exhaled slowly. That's because they've never had to. Most of you come from civilizations that have always known dominance. You built your empires from positions of strength. But humanity, his lips curled into a faint smirk. We crawled up from the dirt. We fought for every inch of progress we've ever made. We weren't handed power. We took it. And we learned, long ago, that the only ones who survive, his eyes darkened, are the ones willing to do anything. The Velnari diplomat, who had remained silent, now spoke, her melodic voice cutting through the tension. I have touched the thoughts of your soldiers, Captain Grant. Her glowing eyes studied him carefully. I have seen the way humans think. There is no surrender in your minds. No acceptance of defeat. Only resolve. Grant nodded once. Because for us, losing isn't an option. The Chancellor exhaled, his face etched with something close to regret. We believed we were superior. We laughed at your weakness. And now we stand corrected. He met Grant's gaze. The question remains, what happens now? Grant let the question hang in the air, watching as the alien leaders exchanged nervous glances. For years, they had looked down on humanity. Now, they were realizing the truth. Humanity had never been weak. They had simply been waiting. The chamber was filled with tension so thick it was almost suffocating. The most powerful leaders of the galaxy, once so sure of their own superiority, now sat in silence, staring at the lone human who had shattered their arrogance. Captain Elias Grant could feel their unease. He could see it in the way their hands twitched, their eyes darted, their tails coiled, or their mandibles clicked nervously. These were beings who had ruled the stars for centuries, who had seen themselves as unchallenged masters of the cosmos. And yet, here they were, afraid. The Chancellor's voice finally broke the silence. What is it that you want, Captain Grant? Grant raised an eyebrow. What do I want? He let the words hang for a moment before shaking his head. You still don't get it, do you? He took a slow step forward, his boots echoing against the polished floor. We never wanted war. We never wanted to prove anything to you. It was you who pushed us, who forced us to show you what humanity truly is. The Bractyl warlord let out a sharp breath, his golden scales glinting under the chamber lights. You expect us to believe you had no interest in conquest, in power? His claws flexed. What species gains such strength and does not seek to rule? Grant smirked. That's your problem. You think strength is only meant for domination. He tilted his head. But tell me something, warlord. If we truly wanted to rule, don't you think we would by now? A chill ran through the room. It was an unspoken truth that no one dared acknowledge. Humanity, even in their supposed weakness, had managed to break an empire, outmaneuver fleets, and turn the tables on those who underestimated them. If they had wanted to conquer, nothing would have stopped them. The Thalric general leaned forward, his massive hands clasped together. Then what do you want? His voice was low, cautious. If not war, if not control, what is it that drives your people? Grant met his gaze, his expression unreadable. Survival, he said simply. We don't fight for power. We fight because we have to. Because history has taught us that if we don't fight for ourselves, no one else will. The Velnari diplomat, her bioluminescent skin pulsing softly, nodded. I have seen this in your people's minds. Even when there is peace, you prepare for war. Even when you have no enemies, you train as if danger is just beyond the horizon. Her glowing eyes narrowed. It is as if you expect the universe to betray you. Grant's expression darkened. Because it always does. The words sent another ripple of discomfort through the chamber. No one could argue against it. After all, they had been the ones to turn against humanity first. The Chancellor leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying Grant carefully. Then let me ask you this. Now that the galaxy has learned the truth about humans, what happens next? Grant exhaled slowly, then looked around the chamber. Some faces were filled with fear, others with anger. But a few held something else. Respect. He allowed himself a small, knowing smile. "That," he said, "depends entirely on you." The silence in the grand chamber was almost deafening. For the first time in their history, the so-called rulers of the galaxy were faced with a truth they could no longer deny. Humanity, once dismissed, mocked, and underestimated, had proven itself beyond any doubt, and now the question lingered in the air like an unspoken threat. What would come next? Captain Elias Grant stood at the center of the room, his presence commanding despite the fact that he was the only human among them. The gathered alien leaders, each representing a different empire, all bore expressions of unease. Some still clung to their arrogance, their pride refusing to let them fully acknowledge what had happened. Others looked at Grant with something far more dangerous. Fear. The Thalric general, a towering beast of muscle and bone, leaned forward. His golden eyes glowed in the dim light. "What do you expect us to do?" His voice rumbled through the chamber, laced with barely contained frustration. "Do you think we will simply bow to you?" Grant smirked, shaking his head. Bowing was never the point. He let his gaze sweep over the gathered rulers, watching them shift uncomfortably. "We're not asking for submission. We're asking for something much simpler." His eyes darkened. Respect. The Velnari diplomat, whose bioluminescent skin pulsed with uncertainty, spoke next. "And if we refuse?" Grant's smirk disappeared. His voice was calm, but his words cut through the air like a blade. "Then you'll have no one to blame but yourselves when history repeats itself." The Bractil warlord, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, his scaled face twisted with barely controlled rage. "You think you can threaten us, human. You think because you won a few battles, because you exposed our weaknesses, that we will simply yield." He slammed a clawed fist against the table, his voice rising. "We have ruled the stars for centuries. We have crushed entire civilizations beneath our feet. What makes you believe we won't do the same to you?" Grant exhaled slowly, almost as if he pitied the warlord. "Because you tried," he said simply. "And you failed." A thick silence followed. The warlord's eyes burned with fury, but he said nothing. He couldn't. There was no denying the truth. The chancellor, the eldest among them, watched the exchange with an expression of deep contemplation. His voice, though quiet, carried weight. "So, what now, Captain Grant?" His gaze was unreadable. "Do we pretend this never happened? Do we go back to our old ways? Or do we acknowledge the reality before us?" Grant took a step forward. "That's up to you," he said. "But understand this. Humanity isn't going anywhere. We're done being ignored. We're done being seen as weak." He paused, letting the words settle in. "If you choose to work with us, the galaxy moves forward. But if you choose to make us your enemy again," his expression hardened, "you've already seen what happens." The gathered leaders exchanged glances. Some still resisted. Others had already made their decision. The power in the galaxy had shifted, whether they liked it or not. For better or worse, humanity had arrived. The galaxy would never be the same again. The moment humanity proved its strength, the very balance of power shifted. And now, the so-called rulers of the stars had a choice to make. Would they acknowledge reality, or would they continue to fight against the inevitable? Captain Elias Grant stood at the center of the chamber, his expression unreadable as he watched the alien leaders struggle with their pride. They had spent years laughing at humanity, dismissing them as weak, insignificant. And now those same leaders sat before him, shaken to their core, their arrogance shattered. The Thalric general, once one of humanity's loudest critics, spoke first. His voice was quieter than before, lacking the usual thunderous confidence. "And if we agree to peace, if we acknowledge your strength?" Grant didn't answer immediately. He let the silence linger, let the weight of their situation press down on them. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "Then we move forward, together." He locked eyes with each of them. "No more underestimation, no more games. We work as equals, or we walk away. The Velnari diplomat, whose kind once mocked humanity's technology, leaned forward. Her bioluminescent skin flickered in thought. And if we refuse? Grant's expression darkened. Then you'll be making the worst mistake of your lives. The Bractil warlord, still unwilling to fully accept the truth, growled lowly. Are you threatening us, human? Grant took a slow step forward, meeting the warlord's glare without hesitation. No, I'm giving you a chance. His voice remained steady. Because we don't need to threaten you. You already know what we're capable of. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't just tension. It was understanding. A realization that humanity was no longer beneath them. They were equals, maybe even more. The Chancellor, the eldest among them, finally spoke. Perhaps, he murmured, we have misjudged you. His ancient eyes met Grant's. Perhaps the true strength of humanity is not just in war, but in defying expectations. Grant gave a small, knowing smile. Then maybe, he said, it's time for a new beginning. The Galactic Council would never be the same. The galaxy itself would never be the same. Because now, humanity had a seat at the table. And this time, no one would dare underestimate them again.